So, let me tell you about the day everything went absolutely, spectacularly wrong at the Galactic Conservation Station 15. And I mean wrong in the way that makes you question every single life choice that led you to this exact moment, standing in a reinforced observation deck, but watching your career circle the drain while a containment alarm screams in your audio receptors. My name is Vec. I am, or rather was, the head of xenobiology at Station 15. Notice I say was. You will understand why shortly. The beast in question? A crevath. Yes, that crevath. The apex predator from Seldrin 4, the kind of creature that makes grown Telgori soldiers weep and request immediate transfers to desk jobs. 6 meters of pure muscle, teeth like plasma cutters, claws that could shred battle armor like wet tissue paper, and a disposition that made volcanic eruptions look calm and reasonable. And it was missing. Gone. Vanished from its reinforced, triple-locked, energy-shielded enclosure like some kind of magic trick, but except magic tricks do not typically result in station-wide lockdowns and formal inquiries that end careers. I stood there, staring at the empty containment unit, feeling my 3 stomachs twist themselves into complicated knots. My assistant, Lyra, stood beside me, her scales flickering through approximately 17 different shades of distress purple. "How?" she whispered, which was pointless because the station alarms were loud enough to wake the dead. "How did it get out?" "Excellent question," I said, my voice dripping with enough sarcasm to corrode metal. Perhaps it asked nicely? Maybe it said please? Or, and here is a wild thought, our supposedly impenetrable security system has more holes than a Zendari cheese wheel. Torm, our security chief, lumbered over. He was a Bregan, which meant he was roughly the size of a small shuttle and about as bright as a burnt-out light panel. The locks were not damaged, he rumbled, scratching his massive head with claws that could have doubled as industrial excavation tools. The energy fields were still active. The surveillance feeds show nothing. Nothing? I repeated, feeling my eye stalks twitch. A 6-meter apex predator just what, phase shifted through solid walls? Teleported? Ascended to a higher plane of existence? I am just telling you what the logs show, sir, Torm said defensively. One moment it was there, next moment, gone. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. This was exactly the kind of incident that got stations defunded, personnel reassigned to monitoring asteroid mining operations, and careers thoroughly destroyed. The station commander, a perpetually stressed Quilvan named Mez, burst into the observation deck, his fur standing on end in every direction. "Tell me you found it. Tell me right now that you found it, and this is all just a drill or a really, really terrible joke." I gestured at the empty containment unit. "Does this look like we found it?" Mez made a sound like a deflating air bladder. "Do you have any idea what that thing could do if it reaches the civilian sectors? Do you have any concept of the paperwork involved in a mass casualty event? The insurance claims alone would bankrupt 3 systems. Your compassion for potential victims is truly touching," I muttered. "My compassion is fine, thank you. My career, however, is currently hanging by a thread made of bureaucratic nightmares and lawsuit potential." Mez rubbed his face with all 4 of his hands, which was never a good sign. But where would it go? What would it do? That was actually a decent question, buried somewhere beneath the panic. Crevaths were hunters, yes, but they were also intelligent. Dangerously so. They did not just rampage mindlessly. They calculated, planned, stalked. Which somehow made this entire situation so much worse. "It would find somewhere safe to hide," Lyra said quietly, tapping at her datapad. "Somewhere it felt secure, away from the lights and sounds of the station. Crevaths hate sensory overload. They prefer dark, quiet spaces. So basically anywhere in the maintenance tunnels, cargo bays, or lower decks," I said. "Perfect. That only leaves about 60% of the station to search." Torm cracked his knuckles, which sounded like small explosions. "I will assemble a tactical team. Full armor, neural disruptors, containment fields. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. Absolutely not. You go in with weapons blazing and that Crevath will either flee further into the station or worse, it will fight. And trust me, you do not want it to fight. Then what do you suggest? Mez demanded, his fur flattening slightly as stress hormones kicked in. We ask it politely to come home? We track it, I said, an idea forming. The Crevath has a unique biological signature, by metabolic rate, specific pheromone markers. We can use the station's sensors to follow its trail, find out where it went, why it went there, and then maybe, just maybe, we can coax it back without anyone dying. Mez did not look convinced, but he also did not have any better ideas. Fine, do it. But if this goes south, if one single creature, sentient or otherwise, gets hurt because of this. I know. Asteroid monitoring duty. Thrilling stuff. I turned to Lyra to get me those bioscanners running, full station sweep, and boost the sensitivity. I want to know every time that thing breathes. The next hour was a delightful mixture of controlled panic and technical difficulties. The bioscanners, which were supposedly state-of-the-art, kept giving us false readings. Apparently, half the species on the station had metabolic signatures similar enough to a Crevath to trigger alerts. Another false positive, Lyra announced for the 15th time, her scales now a resigned shade of gray. This one is just a Horgash eating in the cafeteria. Spicy food, apparently. Very spicy. I resisted the urge to throw my data pad across the room. Recalibrate, narrow the parameters, and focus on the pheromone markers. Nothing else in this station produces Crevath fear scent. Fear scent? Torm asked, suddenly interested. The creature is afraid? All predators produce stress pheromones when they are out of their comfort zone, I explained, pulling up the biochemistry charts. Even apex ones. The Crevath is in an unfamiliar environment, probably disoriented, possibly scared. It will be broadcasting that fear whether it wants to or not. Lyra adjusted the scanners again, her fingers flying over the controls. Got it. Filtering for the specific pheromone signature. Running the scan now and… She stopped. Her scales went very, very still, which, for a species that communicated partially through color changes, was the equivalent of dead silence. Lyra? I prompted. I found it, she said quietly. Where? She turned the display toward me. I stared at the location marker, certain I was reading it wrong. The agricultural sector? I said, confusion obvious in my voice. The Crevath went to the agriculture sector? Why in all the known systems would an apex predator go to the gardens? Not just the gardens, Lyra corrected, zooming in on the map. The groundskeeping facility. Specifically, the human groundskeeper's quarters. The room went silent, except for the soft hum of station systems. Human, Mez repeated slowly, all four eyes widening. The Crevath is with the human? Now, here is the thing about humans. They had joined the Galactic Council about 20 cycles ago, and in that time they had developed a reputation. Not a bad reputation exactly, just a very, very confusing one. They were simultaneously the most cautious and most reckless species anyone had ever encountered. They could calculate orbital mechanics in their heads, but also thought it was funny to jump out of perfectly functioning aircraft for entertainment. And they had this bizarre, inexplicable, absolutely baffling tendency to befriend things that should, by all reasonable standards, kill them. Oh no, I said. Oh no, Torm rumbled. What does oh no mean? It means, I said, already heading for the door, we need to get down there right now before the human does something stupid. Or, knowing humans, something stupidly brilliant that makes no sense but somehow works anyway. The agricultural sector was on the lower levels of the station, a sprawling complex of hydroponic gardens, soil-based growing plots, and what the humans called a real garden, which apparently meant dirt, bugs, and plants that grew at inconvenient angles. The human groundskeeper, a fellow named Marcus Webb, maintained the entire operation basically by himself, which should have been impossible but somehow was not. We ran through the corridors, Mez panting behind us, Torm's heavy footfalls shaking the deck plates. My mind raced through worst-case scenarios. The Crevath cornering Marcus, those massive jaws closing around fragile human bones, the screaming, the blood, the absolute nightmare of explaining to the human diplomatic corps why we had let one of their citizens get eaten by our escaped apex predator. How long ago did the signal place the Crevath at that location? Mez wheezed. Approximately 45 minutes, Lyra said, not even breathing hard despite the sprint. Scaled species had excellent endurance. 45 minutes. More than enough time for everything to have gone horribly wrong. We reached the groundskeeping facility, a modest structure attached to the main greenhouse complex. The door was unlocked, which was either a very good sign or an absolutely terrible one. Weapons? Torm asked, pulling a neural disruptor from his belt. No weapons, I ordered. We go in carefully, assess the situation, and react appropriately. The last thing we need is to startle the Crevath into attack mode. I opened the door slowly, every sensor in my body screaming that this was a monumentally bad idea. The interior was dark, quiet. The smell of soil and plants hung in the air, mixed with something else. Something muskier, sharper. Crevath scent. We moved through the entrance area, past storage lockers filled with gardening equipment, through a small office space cluttered with data pads and soil analysis reports. Everything was neat, orderly, completely normal except for the 6-meter apex predator that was supposedly somewhere in this building. Lyra pointed silently toward a door marked private quarters. The bioscanner in her hand pulsed softly, confirming the Crevath's signature was strongest there. I looked at Mez. He looked at Torm. Torm looked at his disruptor like it might offer some kind of comfort or guidance. It did not. Did not. On 3, I whispered. 1, 2, 3. I opened the door. And there, in the middle of Marcus Webb's modest living space, was the Crevath. All 6 meters of apex predator, capable of tearing through reinforced steel, feared across multiple star systems, the subject of horror stories told to young security recruits. It was curled up on the floor, its massive head resting on its front paws, its tail wrapped around its body. And it was not alone. Marcus Webb, the human groundskeeper, was sitting on the floor beside it, not cowering in terror, not running for his life, not even looking particularly concerned. He was leaning against the Crevath, his back pressed against the creature's side, one hand absently scratching behind what I assumed were the Crevath's auditory organs. The predator's eyes were half closed, and it was making a sound. A low, rumbling, rhythmic sound. The Crevath was purring. I need to stress this because I still do not quite believe it even having witnessed it myself. The apex predator from Seldrin 4, a creature that had caused evacuation orders and planetary advisories, was purring like an oversized earth cat while a human scratched its ears. Well, Marcus said, looking up at us with a casual smile that suggested this was all perfectly normal and reasonable. Looks like we have visitors. Sorry about the mess. Was not expecting company. The mess he referred to appeared to be a few scattered tools and what looked like fresh vegetable cuttings on a nearby table. Mez made a sound that might have been words but came out more like strangled static. Torm's hand had gone slack, the neural disruptor now pointing at the floor, completely forgotten. Lyra's scales were cycling through colors so fast she looked like a malfunctioning display panel. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally managed how, the Crevath. "Oh, you mean Ripley?" Marcus said, giving the creature an affectionate pat that should have resulted in lost limbs at minimum. "Yeah, she showed up about an hour ago. Scared the life out of me at first, not going to lie. But then I figured she must have been stressed, you know. All those bright lights and loud noises up in the containment areas. Poor girl just needed some peace and quiet." Ripley. He had named the apex predator Ripley. "That is a Crevath," I said, my voice climbing several octaves, from Seldrin 4. "An apex predator. It should be trying to kill you right now." Marcus shrugged. A very human gesture that conveyed a remarkable lack of concern about his potential imminent death. Should, maybe. But she is not. Are you, girl? He scratched under the crevatte's jaw. The purring intensified. You are touching it, Torm said, stating the obvious in that special way people do when their brain has stopped processing reality correctly. Marcus corrected gently. And yeah, she likes it. See, I worked in wildlife rehabilitation back on Earth before I took this job. I had experience with big cats, bears, even a few wolves. And the thing about predators is they are not actually mindless killing machines. They are just animals trying to survive. Same as anything else. Big cats, I repeated faintly. Bears. You are comparing a crevatte to Earth animals? I mean, the biology is different, sure. Different evolutionary paths, different environmental pressures. But the basics are the same. This girl here? He patted the crevatte again. She was stressed, overwhelmed, probably scared out of her mind. So she broke out of that containment unit, probably easier than you think if she was motivated enough, and went looking for somewhere safe. And she chose here? Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She chose your quarters? Marcus smiled. Animals have good instincts. She probably smelled the soil, the plants. It reminded her of home. Plus, I have been working in the gardens every day since I got here. She has probably caught my scent, associated it with calm, peaceful spaces. No threats, no aggression. Just someone taking care of growing things. The crevatte, Ripley apparently, shifted slightly, pressing closer to Marcus. He responded by moving his hand to a different spot, finding some sweet spot that made the creature's eyes close completely in contentment. This is impossible, Mez said, but he did not sound angry anymore, just tired and confused. Very, very confused. I mean, it is clearly possible, Marcus said reasonably, since it is happening right now, in front of you. Can you see it? I am not hallucinating, right? You all see the big predator cat too? We see it, I confirmed. Great, so not hallucinating. That is reassuring. Marcus looked down at Ripley. I figure I will keep her here for a few hours, let her calm down completely. Then maybe we can work on a better enclosure situation, something that does not stress her out so much? Because I am guessing the current setup is not working great for either of you. He was not wrong. The current containment system had been designed for security, not comfort. Maximum restraint, minimum consideration for the creature's psychological well-being. You want to redesign the containment protocols, I said slowly, trying to keep up with where this conversation was going, based on the preferences of an apex predator who is currently using you as a pillow. Less using me as a pillow, more I am using her as a backrest. Much more comfortable than it looks. Marcus grinned. But yeah, I mean, you all are scientists, right? You study these creatures. Would not it make more sense to study them in conditions where they are healthy and happy instead of stressed and aggressive? Silence fell over the room. Because, and I really hated to admit this, the human had a point. Station regulations, Mez began weakly. He can be updated, Marcus interrupted. Look, I get it. Safety is important. Protocols exist for good reasons. But sometimes protocols need to be re-evaluated when you get new information. And the new information here is that crevattes respond well to calm environments, gentle handling, and someone who knows what they are doing. You have known this creature for 1 hour, I pointed out. And in that hour she has not eaten me, attacked me, or shown any signs of aggression. I would call that a successful start to a relationship. Marcus scratched behind Ripley's ears again. Besides, I have been reading up on crevattes since you all brought her to the station. Fascinating species. Highly intelligent, complex social structures in the wild, strong territorial instincts, but also capable of forming bonds. Lyra stepped forward carefully, her data pad out. May I take readings? Pheromone levels, stress markers? Sure, but move slowly. Do not want to spook her. Lyra approached with the kind of caution usually reserved for defusing antimatter bombs. She held out her scanner, and I watched the readings populate on her display. Her scales shifted to a surprised shade of teal. Her stress markers are minimal, Lyra reported. In fact, they are lower than they have been since we brought her to the station. Her cortisol equivalent is down 60%. Heart rate is relaxed. She is. Lyra looked up at Marcus in wonder. She is genuinely comfortable. Told you, Marcus said, not smugly but with the satisfied tone of someone whose hypothesis had just been proven correct. Animals are not complicated. They want food, safety, and a bit of kindness. Same as most people, really. Torm had finally lowered his disruptor completely. What do we do now? That was the question, was it not? Standard protocol said tranquilize the creature, haul it back to containment, lock it up even tighter. But looking at Ripley, calm and content, that felt wrong. And more importantly, it felt stupid. We had a unique opportunity here, a chance to actually learn about Krevath behavior in a non-stressed state, to understand them better, to maybe improve our entire approach to xenobiological conservation. All because a human groundskeeper had decided that the galaxy's most feared predator just needed someone to scratch behind its ears. We document everything, I decided. Lyra, full biometric monitoring. I want to know every aspect of how Ripley is responding to this environment. Mez, you are going to love this. We draft new containment protocols. Larger spaces, environmental enrichment, and we consult with Marcus on the design. Consult. Mez sputtered. He is a groundskeeper, not a xenobiologist. He is a groundskeeper who currently has an apex predator using him as furniture and is not dead, I corrected. I would say that makes him qualified. Marcus raised a hand. Just to be clear, I am happy to help. But maybe we move Ripley back to a proper enclosure in the next few hours? My quarters are not exactly rated for permanent apex predator habitation. Plus, I would like to sleep in my bed tonight, not curled up on the floor with 6 meters of predator cat. Fair, I agreed. Although Marcus added thoughtfully, she is very warm, like a living furnace. Might not be the worst thing for cold nights. Please do not adopt the Krevath, I said. Would not dream of it. Just making observations. Ripley yawned, displaying teeth that could have doubled as industrial cutting tools. Then she settled her head back down, pressing closer to Marcus, the purring never stopping. We spent the next 3 hours in that small quarters, watching, recording, learning. Marcus talked us through his approach, explaining his techniques from Earth wildlife rehabilitation, adapting them in real time to Krevath biology. He pointed out signs of relaxation we had missed, stress indicators we had misinterpreted, social cues we had not even known to look for. And gradually, carefully, we began planning the move back to a containment area. Not the old one, but a newly designed space that would meet both safety requirements and Ripley's needs for comfort. As the station's chronometer ticked toward evening shift, Marcus finally stood, Ripley watching him with half-open eyes. "All right, girl," he said softly. "Time to get you home." Well, a better home than you had before. I expected resistance. I expected the Krevath to refuse, to become aggressive at the suggestion of returning to captivity. Instead, Ripley stood, stretched in a way that was hauntingly similar to Earth cats despite the alien biology, and moved to stand beside Marcus. "Waiting." "She trusts you," Lyra said quietly. "She is giving me a chance," Marcus corrected. "Big difference. I have to keep earning it." We walked through the station corridors, an impossible parade. A human leading the way, an apex predator following calmly beside him, and 4 stunned station personnel bringing up the rear. People scattered when they saw us coming. Alarms did not go off because Mez had temporarily disabled them, but that did not stop the panicked whispers, the shocked stares. The frantic messages undoubtedly flying through the station's communication networks. Marcus just kept walking, one hand occasionally reaching out to touch Ripley's shoulder and keeping her calm as we navigated through the bright lights and strange sounds of the station proper. We reached the new temporary enclosure, a cargo bay that had been hastily converted with soft lighting, natural materials, and enough space for Ripley to actually move around. Marcus stepped inside with her, showing her the space, letting her investigate. Only when she had settled into a corner, looking comfortable, did he step back toward the entrance. "I will visit tomorrow," he told her. "Same time. We will work on making this place even better, okay?" Ripley watched him go, made a low chirping sound that was probably a Crevath vocal response, and then curled up exactly as she had been in Marcus's quarters. The human stepped out. The force field activated. And we all stood there, staring at what we had just witnessed. "So," Marcus said, brushing imaginary dirt off his work coveralls, "anyone want to grab dinner? I am thinking cafeteria level 3. They have decent pasta on Tuesdays." "You just befriended an apex predator," I said, my voice still not quite steady. "In an hour. With no training in our species, no background in Crevath biology, nothing but instinct and some earth animal experience." Marcus shrugged again. "Like I said, animals are not that complicated. You just have to listen to what they are telling you and be willing to meet them halfway. Humans," Torm rumbled, shaking his massive head. "You all are absolutely insane." Probably, Marcus agreed cheerfully. "But hey, worked out pretty well today, right?" I could not argue with that. The next morning arrived with all the subtlety of a cargo shuttle crash landing in a quiet residential sector. Which is to say, I woke up to 17 urgent messages, 4 emergency meeting requests, and 1 very angry transmission from the Galactic Conservation Board demanding a full incident report. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I dragged myself to the station command center, where Mez had apparently not slept at all, judging by the way his fur stuck out at angles that defied physics and good sense. Lyra was already there, looking far too alert for someone who should have been as exhausted as I felt. Torm stood in the corner like a large, confused statue. "Tell me something good," I said, pouring myself a cup of stimulant that tasted like battery acid mixed with regret. "Please, lie to me if you have to. I need good news." "The Crevath slept peacefully through the night," Lyra reported, her scales a pleased shade of blue. "No stress responses, no aggressive behavior, and she ate the food we provided without incident. Marcus was right about the environmental adjustments. Ripley is responding extremely well." "Stop calling it Ripley," Mez groaned, all 4 hands covering his face. "It is a research specimen, not a pet." I corrected automatically, and then wondered when exactly I had started going along with Marcus's terminology. "And technically, Mez, you are correct. But also, if calling her Ripley keeps her calm and cooperative, then I am calling her Ripley. You can put whatever you want in the official reports." "The official reports are going to be a nightmare," Mez muttered. "Do you know what the Conservation Board is saying? They are calling this a catastrophic security failure. They want heads to roll. Metaphorically speaking. Probably." "Let them complain," I said, surprising myself with how little I cared. "We have data now. Real, actionable data about Crevath behavior in low-stress environments. That is worth more than whatever bureaucratic hand-wringing they want to engage in." Torm cleared his throat, which sounded like rocks grinding together. "There is another issue. The station population heard about yesterday. Everyone knows the human did something with the Crevath. The rumors are getting creative." "How creative?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. "Some people think he wrestled it into submission with his bare hands," Torm said. "Others think he used some kind of human mind control. One report claims he sang to it." I stared at him. "Sang to it? Humans do have music?" Lyra offered helpfully. "Perhaps their auditory patterns are soothing to Crevath neurological systems." "Nobody sang to anybody," I said firmly. Marcus used common sense, animal behavior knowledge, and a calm approach. "That is it. No wrestling, no mind control, no musical numbers." "You should probably tell everyone that," Torm suggested, "before the rumors get worse." He had a point. The last thing we needed was station personnel either terrified of Marcus or treating him like some kind of mystical beast whisperer. Well, more of a beast whisperer than he apparently actually was. Fine. We will hold a briefing. Explain what actually happened. Show the data. Science will win the day. I took another sip of the terrible stimulant. But first, I need to check on our problem child. Both of them, actually. The walk to the temporary enclosure gave me time to think about just how strange the last 24 hours had been. In my entire career studying xenobiology, I had never seen anything quite like what Marcus had accomplished. Sure, there were documented cases of cross-species bonding, but plenty of research on domestication processes, symbiotic relationships, mutualistic behaviors. But a human forming a connection with an apex predator from a completely different evolutionary tree in under an hour, with no prior contact, that was new. That was unprecedented. That was the kind of thing that got written up in journals and discussed at conferences for cycles to come. And it was also, I was realizing, very typically human. I had spent enough time around humans over the past few cycles to notice certain patterns. They bonded with things. Everything, really. Their ships, their equipment, their workspaces. They gave names to inanimate objects, talked to plants, and treated mechanical systems like living creatures with personalities. And living creatures? They adopted them, befriended them, fought for them, mourned them. It did not matter if the creature in question was from Earth or from a planet 3,000 light-years away. If it was alive and not actively trying to kill them, and sometimes, even if it was, humans would try to connect with it. Most species found this baffling. I was starting to think it might be their greatest strength. We arrived at the cargo bay to find Marcus already there, standing outside the force field, watching Ripley through the transparent section. The Crevath was pacing slowly, exploring her new space, occasionally stopping to sniff at the various enrichment items we had added overnight. "Morning," Marcus said, not looking away from Ripley. "She seems to like the setup. Good job on the modifications." Lyra handled most of it, I admitted. She stayed up half the night researching Celdron 4 environmental conditions and adapting them for the enclosure. Lyra's scales flushed a modest pink. It was fascinating work, actually. Crevath natural habitats are remarkably diverse. They adapt to multiple ecological zones, which suggests high intelligence and behavioral flexibility. "Makes sense," Marcus said. "Smart predators make better survivors. You have to be able to problem-solve, adapt strategies, learn from experience." He glanced at me. "Speaking of learning, I assume you want to document the interaction process? See if yesterday was a fluke, or if we can replicate the results." "That would be ideal, yes, if you are comfortable going in there again." Marcus smiled. "Vek, I am going to let you in on a secret. I am absolutely terrified. That is a 6-meter predator with teeth that could bite me in half. Every instinct I have is screaming that this is a terrible idea." "Then why do it?" Lyra asked, genuinely curious. "Because fear is just information," Marcus said simply. "It tells you there is risk. It does not tell you the risk is not worth taking. And this?" He nodded toward Ripley. "This is worth the risk. For her, for your research, for changing how we think about apex predators in conservation settings." He pressed his hand against the control panel. "Besides, she is not going to hurt me. Are you, girl?" "Girl?" Ripley looked up at the sound of his voice, made that chirping sound again, and moved toward the force field entrance. "She recognizes you," I said, watching the Crevath's body language. "Look at the tail position, the ear placement. Those are positive social indicators." "Told you," Marcus said, deactivating the force field. "Animals are honest. They do not lie about their intentions, but you just have to know how to read them." He stepped inside. Ripley approached slowly, deliberately, giving him time to react. When she was close enough, she lowered her massive head, pressing it against Marcus's chest in what looked disturbingly like an affectionate gesture. Marcus laughed, scratching behind her ears. Good morning to you too. Miss me? The purring started immediately, that deep rumbling sound that seemed to resonate through the entire cargo bay. Biometric readings? I asked Lyra quietly. Both of them are showing relaxed states, she reported, her eyes fixed on her scanner. Marcus's heart rate is slightly elevated but within normal parameters for mild exercise. No fear response. Ripley is completely calm. Oxytocin analog levels are rising in both of them. Oxytocin? I repeated. The bonding hormone? Well, the Cravath equivalent, yes. But Marcus is human, so his is actual oxytocin. Different chemistry, same basic function. They are literally bonding on a neurological level. I watched as Marcus moved around the enclosure with Ripley following him like an oversized shadow. He showed her the different areas we had set up, let her investigate new scents, encouraged her to use the climbing structures. And the Cravath responded to him, not with submission exactly, but with trust. How long do you think this took to develop in the wild? Marcus called out, running his hand along Ripley's flank. The social bonding, I mean. How long before young Cravaths learned to trust their parents? Several weeks, I said, pulling up the data on my pad. Initial imprinting happens quickly, within days, but full social bonding takes approximately 40 to 50 days. And we did it in less than 24 hours. Marcus looked thoughtful. That suggests something about captivity stress interfering with normal social development. If she was that ready to bond, that desperate for positive contact, then the previous containment system was not just uncomfortable. It was actively harmful to her psychological health. Mez, who had joined us during the exchange, made a sound like a deflating balloon. Are you suggesting we have been torturing our research specimens this entire time? Torturing is a strong word, Marcus said diplomatically. But causing unnecessary suffering? Yeah, probably. Not on purpose, you did not know. But now you do, which means you can do better. The Conservation Board will never approve the budget for these kinds of modifications across all containment facilities, Mez said. But he sounded defeated rather than argumentative. Do you have any idea how expensive this would be? Do you have any idea how expensive it is to deal with escaped apex predators? I countered. The security alerts, the lockdowns, the potential injury claims, the insurance premiums. Seems to me that investing in proper enclosures would save money in the long run. Not to mention being ethically correct, which should count for something. Marcus emerged from the enclosure, Ripley watching him go with what I was almost certain was disappointment. She is going to need more than just environmental changes, he said. She needs regular social interaction, daily visits, varied activities, mental stimulation. Keeping an intelligent predator locked up with nothing to do is like keeping a genius in an empty room and expecting them to stay sane. You are volunteering? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Someone has to, and I seem to have a knack for it. Marcus grinned. Plus beats weeding the hydroponic gardens. Do not get me wrong, I love my plants, but they are not exactly conversationalists. Over the next several days, we fell into a routine. Marcus would visit Ripley twice daily, spending hours working with her, documenting everything. Lyra and I observed, recorded data, analyzed behavioral patterns. Torm provided security, though his main job seemed to be keeping curious station personnel from bothering us. And Ripley thrived. Her physical condition improved. Her stress markers dropped to levels we had never seen in captive Cravaths. She became playful, engaging, responsive. She learned commands, basic communication signals, and seemed to genuinely enjoy the training sessions. Word spread through the station. Scientists from other departments started requesting observation time, but the Conservation Board, despite their initial outrage, began paying attention to our data. Other facilities with apex predators started asking questions about our methods. It was working. Against all odds, against all established protocols, Marcus's approach was revolutionizing how we thought about xenobiological conservation. Of course, that is when things got complicated. I should have known it was coming. Success in research always attracts attention, and attention always brings politics. Director Crane arrived on Station 15 without warning, which was very much in character for the head of the Galactic Conservation Board. She was a Quellan, tall and angular, with crystalline skin that refracted light in ways that gave me headaches. She also had a reputation for being brilliant, ruthless, and completely uninterested in excuses. "Show me," she demanded the moment she stepped off her transport. No greeting, no pleasantries, just straight to business. We took her to Ripley's enclosure. Marcus was already there, naturally, sitting on the floor with the Crevath's head in his lap, talking to her about Earth wolves and pack dynamics. Ripley looked completely content, occasionally making soft sounds in response to Marcus's voice. Crane watched for exactly 90 seconds, then said, "Explain." So I did. I walked her through everything. The escape, the discovery, Marcus's intervention, the behavioral changes, the improved health markers, the bonding process. I showed her our data, our research notes, Lyra's detailed analysis of Crevath's psychology in low-stress environments. She listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable, light dancing across her features in patterns I could not interpret. When I finished, she stared at Marcus for a long moment. "You have no formal training in xenobiology." "No ma'am," Marcus agreed, not looking up from Ripley. "Just hands-on experience with Earth animals and common sense." "Common sense," Crane repeated, like she was testing the words for poison. "You are aware that Crevaths have killed trained handlers? That there are specific protocols, developed over cycles of research, designed to minimize risk?" "I am aware," Marcus said. "I also think those protocols might have been creating the problems they were trying to solve. Stress responses, aggression, escape attempts, all signs of an animal in psychological distress. You were not seeing natural Crevath behavior. You were seeing captivity psychosis." Crane's light patterns flickered rapidly, which I had learned meant she was thinking intensely. "You are suggesting we restructure our entire approach to apex predator conservation based on your success with a single specimen." "I am suggesting you consider the evidence and make informed decisions," Marcus corrected gently. "Ripley is not special. She is just a Crevath who was given a chance to exist without constant stress. Any other apex predator would likely respond similarly to proper environmental conditions and positive social contact." "Prove it," Crane said. Marcus looked up at her. "Sorry?" "Prove it. We have 3 other Crevaths in the system, each at different facilities. Work with them. Document the results. If you can replicate this success, then we will discuss implementing your methods more broadly." She paused. "You will be compensated, of course, and given whatever resources you require." "I have plants to take care of," Marcus pointed out. "A whole agricultural sector that needs maintenance." "We will assign someone else to the gardens," Crane said dismissively. "This is more important." I watched Marcus's expression carefully. He was not angry exactly, but there was something in his eyes that made me think of Ripley when she was deciding whether to trust something new. "With respect," Director Marcus said slowly, "the gardens are not just my job. They are my responsibility. I made a commitment to those plants, to maintaining the station's food supply, to the people who depend on that work. I am not abandoning that because you have decided this is more important." "The Conservation Board can make arrangements," Crane insisted. "I am sure you can, but I am still not walking away from my responsibilities just because you are offering me something shinier." Marcus scratched Ripley's ears, the Crevath making happy sounds. "I will help with the other Crevaths. I would be honored to. But I do it on my terms, in my time, without abandoning the work I already committed to. That is the deal." The cargo bay went very quiet. Nobody said no to Director Crane. In my entire career, I had never heard anyone refuse her anything, let alone a human groundskeeper with no formal rank or authority. Crane stared at Marcus for what felt like approximately 7 years, but was probably only 10 seconds. Then, incredibly, she laughed. Not a mean laugh, but genuine amusement. "Humans," she said, shaking her head. You all really are as strange as the reports suggest. Fine. Your terms. Part-time consulting work with the other Crevets, maintain your agricultural duties, and we provide you with whatever support staff you need for both positions. Deal, Marcus agreed, offering his hand in the human gesture of agreement. Crane looked at it, clearly uncertain what to do with it, then awkwardly pressed her hand against his. I will be watching your progress closely, she said, pulling her hand back. If this works, you will be revolutionizing xenobiology. If it fails, you will be responsible for a very expensive and public disaster. No pressure then, Marcus said cheerfully. But it will work. I am sure of it. After Crane left, Mez looked at Marcus with something approaching awe. You just negotiated with the director of the Conservation Board. And won. How are you not terrified? Oh, I am terrified, Marcus admitted. But she needed to hear no. People in power always need to hear no sometimes, or they start thinking they are infallible. And infallible people make bad decisions. Whereas the work with the other Crevets was challenging but ultimately successful. Marcus traveled to different stations, each time working patiently with apex predators who had been labeled as aggressive, unmanageable, or dangerous. Each time he found the same thing. Not monsters, just animals responding to stress and captivity. 3 months later, I found myself writing the final report for the Conservation Board. The data was undeniable. Across all 4 Crevets, we had seen dramatic improvements in health, behavior, and psychological well-being. Regression incidents had dropped to nearly 0. Enrichment activities were being engaged with enthusiastically. The creatures were thriving. And it had all started because a human groundskeeper had decided that an escaped apex predator probably just needed someone to be kind to it. I transmitted the report and leaned back in my chair, feeling satisfied in a way I had not experienced in cycles. My communicator chimed. Marcus, of course. Hey, Vec, Ripley did something amazing today. She figured out how to open the puzzle feeder on her own, without any prompting. I think she is smarter than we give her credit for. Want to come see? I did. I absolutely did. As I walked through the station toward the enclosure that had become Ripley's permanent home, a proper habitat now instead of a bare containment unit, I thought about what we had learned. Not just about Crevets, though that was significant, but about assumptions, about protocols, about the difference between control and care, about how sometimes the answer to complex problems is not more complexity but more compassion, and about humans, these strange creatures who had joined the galactic community and immediately started making everything both more complicated and more interesting. They bonded with everything. They saw individuals where others saw specimens. They treated animals with the same respect they gave to sentient beings. They questioned authority, challenged assumptions, and refused to accept that just because something had always been done a certain way, it should continue to be done that way. It made them infuriating sometimes, but it also made them invaluable. I reached the enclosure to find Marcus teaching Ripley what he called a high five, which involved the Crevath tapping her massive paw against his raised hand. It was ridiculous. It was adorable. It was scientifically valuable data about interspecies communication and learning. Ready to take some notes? Marcus asked, grinning at me. I think we can expand this to more complex command sequences. Maybe even teach her to participate in her own medical exams voluntarily. It would reduce stress and make everything easier for everyone. Absolutely, I said, pulling out my data pad. Let us see what else we can learn. Ripley chirped happily, pressed her head against Marcus for scratches, and then turned her attention to the new puzzle feeder Marcus had prepared. Somewhere in the administrative levels, bureaucrats were probably arguing about policies and procedures. Somewhere else, scientists were analyzing our data and writing papers about revolutionary approaches to xenobiological conservation. But here, in this moment, there was just a human, an apex predator, and the simple truth that sometimes the best science comes from listening to what the universe is trying to tell you and being brave enough to challenge everything you thought you knew. You know what the best part about all this is? Marcus said, watching Ripley work on the puzzle. A year ago, she was just a specimen number in a database. Now she has a name, a personality, a life that matters beyond data points. That is worth more than all the research papers in the galaxy. I could not argue with that either. The human was right. Again. As annoying as that was, I had to admit it felt good to be part of something that mattered, something that made a real difference. And if I occasionally found myself talking to my lab equipment or giving encouraging words to particularly stubborn data sets, well, nobody needed to know about that. Some human habits were worth adopting in private. Ripley solved the puzzle, received enthusiastic praise from Marcus, and settled down for an afternoon nap with all the contentment of a creature who finally had what every being deserves: safety, comfort, and someone who genuinely cared about their well-being. It had been one hell of a month. But standing there watching Marcus and Ripley together, seeing the success of our new protocols, knowing that we had genuinely improved lives instead of just studying them, worth every moment of chaos, confusion, and bureaucratic nightmare that had brought us here. Humans, I decided, might be absolutely insane. But they were also exactly what the galaxy needed, even if we had not known it before they arrived. And Ripley? She was just a crevasse who got lucky enough to meet the right human at the right time. Sometimes that is all it takes to change everything.